Hare Krishna. Good morning from Sridham Mayapur, dear devotees. This is our daily discussion of Srimad Bhagavatam. Shri Guru Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Jai Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Jai Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Jai Radha Madhava Valabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Valabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Valabha Jaya Sodanandana Jaya Braja Janarandana Jaya Braja Jaya Sodanandana Jaya Braja Janarandana Jaya Sodanandana Jaya Braja Janarandana Jaya Braja Jaya Sodanandana Jaya Braja Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantarai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Gopremanandi Hari Hari Bol. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Shaiva Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayat Vedi Ramayane Shaiva Purane Bharate Tata Adavande Chamadye Chahari Sarvatra Giyate Mukam Karori Vachalam Bangum Langayate Girim Yad Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Paramananda Madhavam Paramananda He Madhava Vadundamichi Makaranda Se Makaranda Panakori Anande Bolo Hari Hari Harinkaname Vandavela Harikori Chakadola Se Chakadolanka Padaye Manamo Rahu Nirantare Manamo Nirantare Rahu Ha Krishna Boli Jiva Jao Ha Krishna Boli Jao Jiva Motu Dada Radha Dada Motu Dada Radha Dada Motu Dada Radha Dada Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Good morning, dear devotees. Nice to see everyone here this morning. Sasha's even here. It's very good. Brajavanita, Mitravinda, and Natalie. Lynn is here, all the way from Seattle, Washington, a little ways away from here. So we're reading from Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam, King of all literatures. Canto 3, Chapter 25, Devotional Service, text number 37. Ato vibhutim mama maya vinastam aishvaryam ashtanga anupravritam shriham bhagavatim vasprihayanti bhadram parashyamete shrivate tu loke. Thus, because he is completely absorbed in thought of me, the devotee does not desire even the highest benediction obtainable in the upper planetary systems, including Satyalok. He does not desire the 8 material perfections obtained from mystic yoga, nor does he desire to be elevated to the kingdom of God. Yet even without desiring them, the devotee enjoys, even in this life, all the offered benedictions. Srila Prabhupada's purport: the vibhuti or opulences offered by Maya are of many varieties. We have experience of different varieties of material enjoyment, even on this planet. But if one is able to promote himself to higher planets like Chandralok, the sun, or still higher, Maharlok, Janalok, and Tapalok, or even ultimately the highest planet, which is inhabited by Brahma, is called Satyalok, there are immense possibilities for material enjoyment. For example, the duration of life on higher planets is far, far greater than on this planet. It is said that on the moon, the duration of life is such that our 6 months are equal to 1 day. We cannot even imagine the duration of life on the highest planet. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita that Brahma's 12 hours are inconceivable even to our mathematicians. These are all descriptions of the external energy of the Lord, or Maya. Besides these, there are other opulences which the yogis can achieve by their mystic power. They are also material. A devotee does not aspire for all these material pleasures, although they are available to him simply by wishing. By the grace of the Lord, a devotee can achieve wonderful success simply by willing. But a real devotee does not like that. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was taught that one should not desire material opulence or material reputation, nor should one try to enjoy material beauty. One should simply aspire to be absorbed in the devotional service of the Lord, even if one does not get liberation, but has to continue the process of birth and death unlimitedly. Actually, however, to one who engages in Krishna consciousness, liberation is also guaranteed. Devotees enjoy all the benefits of the higher planets and the Vaikuntha planets also. It is especially mentioned here, Bhagavatim Bhadram. In the Vaikuntha planets, everything is eternally peaceful. Yet a pure devotee does not even aspire to be promoted there. But still, he gets that advantage. He enjoys all the facilities of the material and spiritual worlds, even during the present lifespan. Gora Draganya Gana Gota Goloruharam Goranga Gura Tamagopyara Kopa Briksham Gopala Gada Ratidam Yati Singha Gora Govinda Deshikavaram Satatam Numami Panchakalpatarubhishcha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacham Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I want to thank everybody very much for encouraging us and taking part in this discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, which we're trying to have every day. So Srila Prabhupada writes in his purport, nor should one try to enjoy material beauty. One should simply aspire to be absorbed in the devotional service of the Lord, even if one does not get liberation, but has to continue the process of birth and death unlimitedly. So we've been discussing something for the last few days about art, beauty, and bhakti. And yesterday we spoke something about how the culmination of all three of those, art, beauty, and bhakti, is when they manifest in the senses. And today we titled our discussion that only ascetics are truly aesthetic. And it's interesting, these two words, ascetics and aesthetic, they have some similarity. As we spoke yesterday, the root word of aestheticism, it comes from the Greek. It's a combination of two words, aestheta, which means perceptible things, and aesthestai, which means to perceive. So aestheticism, which is a synonym of art, refers to the senses, to be able to perceive something. Similarly, the word beauty comes from the Latin word belitatum, which means a state of being pleasing to the senses. So beauty also is, the word beauty is intrinsically connected with the senses. And the word ascetic comes from the Greek word ascetikos, which means someone who's very disciplined, who's controlling the senses, who's focusing the senses. And it was originally a word which referred to someone who's an athlete, but also someone who's a monk or a hermit, or someone who practices art. So originally the sense of the word of ascetic was someone who's completely absorbed in art. And as we mentioned the last couple of days, quoting from the great secular artist Leonardo da Vinci. He said, the lover is drawn by the thing loved, as the sense is by that it perceives. So we've been speaking something about the connection between the connoisseur of art and art itself, and how the two are inseparable. So Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he speaks about what happens with the senses when they're engaged in mundane sense objects. This appears in the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. It's a very scientific description. He says, Jayato vishayan pumsa sangaste shupajayate. That Jayata vishayan, when someone contemplates the vishay, or the sense objects, then sangaste shupajayate. Upajayate, something develops, a sangha. They develop attachment for those sense objects. And sangat sanjayate kama, from that attachment comes lust. Kama krodha bhajayate. And from that lust, anger develops. Srila Prabhupada writes in his purport to this verse, he says, one who is not Krishna conscious is subjected to material desires while contemplating the objects of the senses. The senses require real engagements. And if they're not engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, they'll certainly seek engagement in the service of materialism. So then in the next verse in the Gita, text 63, Krishna explains further the sequence of events, what happens in a very, very scientific way. Krodad bhavati samoha, samoha smriti vibrama, smriti brahmsha buddhinasho, buddhinashat pranashyati. That from this krodha, from this anger, bhavati samoha, samoha comes, one becomes illusion. And samoha, smriti vibrama, from that samoha, then smriti vibrama comes. One forgets that they forget about everything. And from that smriti vibramaha comes smriti brahmshad, buddhinasha. They lose their intelligence. And buddhinashat pranashyati, then one falls down. So this is a sequence of events that happens when one engages the senses in the sense objects. But if we contemplate on the verse, we can see the interesting thing, we can look at it in a completely different way also. That while contemplating Krishna with our senses, Jayato Vishayam Pumsa, Sangaste Shupajayate, then we develop some sangha, we develop some attachment to that form of Krishna. We develop attachment to the holy name of Krishna. And sangat sanjayate kama, from that attachment to Krishna, upajayate, something develops, we develop this lust. In other words, we develop some asakti, we develop some ruchi, some attachment for Krishna. And then the next thing Krishna says is krodad, karma krodha bhajayate, that lust turns into anger. And Jamunacharya, he describes, Yat avarya mama cheta Krishna padara vinde nava nava rasadaman yudatam rantamasit tavadari abatanari sangame smaryamane bhavati mukha vikara shustu nishti vanamcha. He says that ever since I've engaged my senses in meditating on Krishna, whenever I think of sex pleasure, which is the topmost pleasure in this material world, he says, my lips curl with distaste. I become disgusted, and I spit with disgust. Very nasty thing. I don't want this. So this verse and the Gita, these two verses, speak about the progression of meditation on material elements, but they also can be applied to spirit. And when someone develops attachment to Krishna, then they develop some ruchi, some rati toward Krishna, or kama. And then from that kama comes krodha bhavati samho. Krodha bhajayate, some anger. They become disgusted with all these, with everything material. And then as one becomes more and more disgusted with everything material, then samoha, they become completely bewildered and they become absorbed in the ecstasy of love of God. And buddhi nasha pranashati, they lose all their material intelligence. And buddhi nasha pranashati means to fall down. They fall down from the material realm. Or as described in one nice book, the madness of the saints. When the saints become completely mad in bhakti, they become useless for everything material. So again, as we spoke yesterday, in the Narada Pancharatra, which is quoted in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it says that bhakti is defined in connection with the senses. Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tapparatvena nirmalam. That when we become so absorbed with our senses in the objects of bhakti that we forget who we are. Sarvapadi vinirmuktam. We give up all these different designations. And rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti uchate. We become so absorbed in simply pleasing the Lord. And as we've been speaking for the last few days, this is the nature of art. Art and bhakti must penetrate the heart and cause the head to spin. Srila Rupa Goswami is given a very beautiful verse in his Vidagdha Madhav, wherein he describes the nature of the senses when they're engaged with bhakti. And he's specifically speaking about when we engage the tongue in chanting the holy name of Krishna. No jane janita diya diranitai Krishna divanadvai. No jane janita diya diranitai Krishna divanadvai. Tunde tandavani ratimbikanute tundavali labdaye. This verse describes the perfection of art. The perfection, because art means we have to relish art. If there's no relishment, if there's no astonishment, art is meant to create astonishment. Bhakti is meant to create astonishment. Bhakti is meant to relish. If there's no relishment, then where is the question of really bhakti? If there's no relishment, where is the question of art? So he says, Tunde tandavani ratim vitanute tundavali labdaye. He says, I don't know, this is an astonishing thing. These two syllables, Krishneti varna dvai. When I chant these two syllables with my mouth, those two syllables, they start dancing in my mouth. And then I want to have tundavali labdaye. Labdaye means I have this desire. I want to have millions and millions of mouths. And then when that sound of Krishna, karna kroda kadambani gatayate karna abiduha spriham, when it enters into the holes of my ears, then I desire to have millions and millions of ears. So this is bhakti, when we engage the senses in the object of bhakti, in the supreme art object, which is Krishna, the form of Krishna, the name of Krishna, the Krishna prasadam, all the different objects in connection with Krishna. And when we do that, when we engage those senses in the sense objects related to Krishna, then chaita prangana sangani vijayate sarvendriyanam kritim. Then, when that sound of Krishna goes from my tongue, originally I heard it from some Vaishnav, and it entered through my ears and it came into my heart, and then it came out again from my tongue. So I'm engaging in this service of the holy name with my tongue. And then the sound of Krishna's name enters into my ear. When it really enters into the ear, when it's really on the tongue, I desire millions of tongues. It's not a burden to chant, it's an ecstasy to chant. And when it enters my ears, it's not a burden to sit and listen It's an ecstasy to listen. And then when it goes in my ear, then Chaita, it comes and enters into my heart. Chaita Prangana. And that heart is said to be like a prangana. Prangana means the courtyard. Courtyard means a private place within the house. Traditionally, Vedic buildings, they oftentimes they're shaped like a square. And the square has a hollow center. And that center is a courtyard inside of the house. And the rooms of the house are built around in that square shape. We've been in many houses like this, still in the villages in India today. So that's the courtyard of the house. There's a courtyard of the heart. And when Chaita Prangana Sangani, when that sound of Krishna's name associates with the courtyard of our heart, when it comes to our heart, then Vijayate Sarvendriyanam. It conquers all the senses. All the senses become conquered. And this is true art. When the senses of the person become completely absorbed in that music, in that drama, in the food they're tasting, when some connoisseur of wine, if he can become completely absorbed in that taste of the wine, that's real being a connoisseur, that's really relishing. But that activity is only limited with the material senses and the material objects. But when we engage the senses, the material senses, in Krishna's service, in meditating on Krishna, then those senses become spiritualized, and there's no limit to them. Then all of a sudden we want millions of tongues and millions of ears, and we're able to relish unlimitedly Krishna. And then what happens at that time, someone becomes completely detached. But that detachment is truly ascetic, is being a true ascetic, because they're relishing something aesthetic. A true connoisseur is someone who's an ascetic, who's a renunciate. It means they're giving up everything else. They're completely focused on that thing. In the material world, perhaps the greatest concept of art is there in the concept of love. But love in this material world and in the spiritual world indicates one-pointedness. If some boy comes to a girl and says, "Baby, I love you, honey," and he said that to 10 different girls in school that day, then the girls will become disgusted. They'll slap him in the face, go away. Because that love, it's not really love. It's not one-pointed. But real love means that it's completely focused on that particular thing. This is the real connoisseur of art. That person can become completely, totally absorbed in the object of art. It's not possible in the material world. But it is possible in Krishna consciousness. And therefore Krishna consciousness, or bhakti, is a topmost art form. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives a very wonderful example of this in his beautiful book, Krishna Bhavanamrita, where he speaks about the pastime of Krishna leaving for the forest to herd the cows, and the feelings of separation that the Brajbasis experience when Krishna leaves. Mother Yashoda, all the residents of Vrindavan, they go following Krishna out. They don't want to leave Krishna. And Krishna is with the boys, and the boys are kind of rolling their eyes in their head. Mother Yashoda is saying, "Krishna, you may become hungry when you're out there today in the forest, so I should go with you." And the boys are thinking, "Oh my God, if Krishna's mother comes with us, then how are we going to have any fun whatsoever? This is not good." And Krishna has to do something, because you can't just, when you go out with your friends, you can't bring your mother with you. All your friends will tease you like anything. And what to speak, when you go with your girlfriend, you don't bring your mother on a date. And Krishna's going to meet with the gopis. So Mother Yashoda, she has so much love for Krishna, and the other residents of Vrindavan, they're worried about it. They say, "Krishna, if you go out there, you may become hungry." And Krishna says, "Ma, you've given me such a lunch. 10 people can't eat what you've given me." And in every way that Mother Yashoda appeals to Krishna that I should go with you, Krishna gives some answer to her indicating, no, why you should stay back. And so finally Mother Yashoda is defeated. And then Krishna leaves to go to the forest. But what happens when Krishna leaves to go to the forest? It's described by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Madhi cheda ujona baba kamaho cheta priyana matas tanidvani jasanga eva rupunam yaniti rate haro kona shabishayo no ityanayas tesham Sodeshmatu Svasvadashnabhi eva samskriti vasan Mutto namaskadisham. When Krishna was going to the forest, he thought to himself, those who love me, they feel sad when I leave. So, let me take their minds with me. And Krishna took the minds of all the Brijbasis. But at that time, Krishna thought, oh, Chaita Priyana Matus, let me take their Chaita, their consciousness along with me. But at that time, the eyes of the Brijbasis, they thought, what other objects do we have but Krishna? And so the eyes of the Brijbasis followed Krishna. And in this way, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that the Brijbasis, they became stunned and they just stood there. And they were maintaining their bodies just as like an external custom. Because they weren't there. They weren't even aware of their bodies. Their consciousness, their senses were completely, totally absorbed in Krishna. And this is the topmost relishment of art. When someone can come to this platform. And when they come to that platform, they forget about everything else. Sarvandriyanam kritim, all the senses become completely immobile. And it's not necessary to try to control the senses, but rather we simply engage the senses in bhakti, and then automatically so many other things come. There's a nice story in this regard which we'll finish with. Many, many things we'd like to speak about. Still, I've only begun to scratch the surface of this topic. It's a very big topic. In Jagannath Puri, it's an interesting thing. There's a great contrast, or a great, tension between sweetness and opulence, between rituals and spontaneous love. You have the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's actually Krishna, who's taken the form of Jagannath there in Puri, and he's being held, he's being controlled by ritualistic people who are worshiping him as God. But the gopis and the residents of Vrindavan, they don't want to see him like that. They want to see him in a very sweet way. So it creates a kind of tension. And interestingly, many of the greatest devotees in Jagannath Puri were not allowed inside the temple. One such devotee lived in a village nearby, about 50 kilometers away from Puri. He was born in the 1790s in the village of Baligram, and his name was Dasya Bauri. And Dasya Bauri, from his childhood, he was considered to be an untouchable, his caste. He was, by caste, he was a weaver of cloth, which is considered to be a very low-class person. And traditionally, they were not allowed inside the Jagannath Mandir. Today, they're also allowed inside. They just don't allow white guys like myself, foreigners inside. But, and they don't allow Muslims inside if they know they're a Muslim. But Dasya Bauri and his family were not allowed inside. But Dasya Bauri was a great devotee, and he grew up doing kirtan and hearing recitations of the Bhagavatam and the Ramayana and different literatures. And although he couldn't read and write, he loved to sing songs about the Lord. He loved to hear from the Bhagavatam and the Ramayana and different things. And on one occasion, while he was singing, sometimes he would feel as though someone were embracing him. He was engaging all of his senses in the service of Krishna. And Krishna began to appear before him. Once he heard a voice. Krishna spoke and said, Dasya, You're my dear devotee. I've created all living entities, and all of them are my sons and daughters. There's no question of untouchability or separation between me and anyone else. So eventually, Dashabari's parents got him married, and his wife, they had no children, and they maintained their existence in a very simple way by weaving cloth. But although they were very poor and didn't have any children, they were very happy because they were absorbing all their senses in bhakti. On one occasion, the Rath Yatra festival was taking place in Jagannath Puri. And Dashabari developed a very strong desire to have darshan of Lord Jagannath. But he wasn't allowed inside the temple. But during the Rath Yatra, Lord Jagannath, he has so much love for his devotees that he doesn't wait anymore. He just goes outside to see the devotees. Sometimes the pandits and people in Jagannath Puri, they tell me that, Madhavananda, you're very unfortunate. And I say, why? Can you press that button, please? And they say, because you can't go inside the temple, press it again, to see Lord Jagannath. And, is it turned on now? And I tell them, I don't have to go inside the temple to see Jagannath, but Jagannath comes outside the temple to see me. And we call that Rath Yatra. And so for the devotees, with those persons who were born in low families like myself, like Dashabari, like Salubeg and other great Vaishnavas, we're not in that category, but we're very happy to somehow be in something of a category with them. They immediately go to Rath Yatra to see Lord Jagannath. And so Dashabari, he walked those 50 miles, 50 kilometers to Jagannath Puri. And when he arrived there, he saw that Lord Jagannath had just come to the Gundicha Mandir and was sitting on his cart. And when Dashabari just saw the face of Lord Jagannath, he became stunned. Because he was engaging his senses completely in bhakti. And then Krishna entered into Dashabari through his sense of vision. And Dashabari then manifested the ecstasy of stamba, where he became like a column. He became stunned in ecstasy. And he just stood there with his eyes just completely focused on Lord Jagannath. He's the greatest yogi. He's the greatest connoisseur of art. No one needs to tell him to control his senses, because he's engaged his senses in the object of the senses, the supreme object, which is Krishna, the supreme object of art. Then the senses, sarvendriyanam kritim, they've become conquered very, very easily by that. And Dashabari just stood there. He wasn't able to move his eyes from the Lord. And he stood there for the entire day, for something like 8 or 10 hours. And finally, by the end of the day, one of the residents of Baligram, his village, noticed, hey, that's our Dashabari. Hey, and they ran over and they grabbed him. Hey, Dasha, come with us. And Dashabari, although they took him by the arm, his mind, his heart were with Jagannath. And they brought him back just like a zombie, not conscious of his body whatsoever. And they brought him back to his wife. And his wife was very concerned what happened to my husband. But she's a good wife. So she decided she would cook some pakal for her husband. Pakal in Orissa it's like pizza in America or something. It's a very, very popular dish. And pakal, this means water rice. And they take some rice, it's soaked in water for maybe a day, and it's cooked and soaked. And they mix it with some yogurt. And she served that to her husband. They were very poor, in a clay pot. And the clay pot was red, made out of clay. And the pakal was whitish with the yogurt. And they didn't have money for any vegetables. So she knew what you can pick, wild vegetables. And she picked some wild spinach and cooked that. And so in the center of that dish, which was a red circular bowl with a white pakal in it, there was a black leaf of spinach, which was round right in the center of it. And she gave that to her husband. And when Dashabari saw that, all of a sudden he became ecstatic and he started jumping up and down. Hurrah! 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 And then he started falling down on the ground and offering obeisances and getting up and dancing and jumping up and down. And his poor wife, she started crying. What happened to my husband? Oh my God. And she ran next door to one of her friends and she said, my husband, some ghost or something is haunting him. You please come. And they came and they saw he was jumping up and down and like this. And they said, what happened to him? She said, I don't know. When he went with those Hare Krishna people, he's come back and now he's like this. He went and had darshan of Lord Jagannath, and ever since then he's become like this. And finally, one of the neighbors, they asked, they said, Dasha, why are you dancing instead of eating? And he said, how can I eat this thing? This is like the eye of my Lord. Because that red bowl looks like the red outline, the red circular outline of Chakadola Jagannath. Chakadola means that personality who has round eyes. And there's white there, and there's a black circle in the center, just like the eye of Lord Jagannath. And Dasha Bauri, his senses were so absorbed in thought of Jagannath, of Krishna, that he was seeing Krishna Jagannath everywhere, even in that pakal, even in that water rice. And so then the neighbor told him, just take the spinach out of there, out of the pot. And so when the wife did that, then Dasha Bauri calmed down, sat down and had his lunch. So this is some of the drama that goes on in the Hare Krishna movement, if we really join the Hare Krishna movement. When someone's senses become completely absorbed in Krishna, this is the real culmination of art. That when someone deeply focuses their senses on Krishna, who's the true object of art, they naturally become one-pointed in their absorption. And persons, when they reach that stage, they're the true connoisseurs of art. They're the true bhaktas. And so that person who's an ascetic, who's given up everything, he's truly aesthetic. He truly relishes art. He's a true relisher of art. Only someone who's an ascetic, who's given up everything, is truly aesthetic. And therefore these two words, even in English, they have some connection between them. And as we've been discussing, these two things, art and bhakti, they also have a very intimate connection. So we'll go ahead and stop here now. And if anybody has any reflections or comments, you can go ahead and make them now. Look and see what's been written online. Sri Maya Prabhu, Hare Krishna, nice to see you. And Mitravinda, yes, sounds like the melody from the 6 Goswamis. It's the same meter, the same type of verse, which was in that Goswami Ashtakam. And Mitravinda comments that there's no relishment, there's no bhakti. That's right. It's something else. Brajabanita says, it's said that ethics come from ascetics. Yes, the word ethics come from ascetics also. It's a very nice comment, very nice point. And Ramananda Gopal Prabhu, thank you very much for your comments yesterday, your private comments to me. I'm happy you're appreciating some of the subject. That everything that we do is a wonderful story, which I'm not going to tell today. This topic about art and bhakti, it's an almost unlimited topic. But there's a wonderful story we sometimes tell about the day when Krishna desired so much to reciprocate with Srimati Radharani, and how Radharani was always serving him. Krishna decided, I want to serve Radharani. But there's a problem. She'll never accept my service. So if I want to serve her, then I have to go in disguise. And Krishna then dressed himself up as a woman. And he went, and he was being very careful not to touch Srimati Radharani, but Krishna began to engage in so many different services to Srimati Radharani. This is told in a very wonderful book called Vaidagdha Vilas by Manohar Das. And the description he gives there, I was mentioning, I'm thinking of Ramananda Gopal Prabhu as a pujari. Krishna is a supreme pujari. And he makes a bed for Radharani, he makes decorations with flowers on the bed. He makes, when Radharani rises up from her nap, he has a fruit plate, and all the fruits, they're carved in the form of swans and lotus flowers and different things, and there's sweets in the form of flowers and different things, because Krishna is a supreme pujari. And we see all these arts, they're connected also with serving the deity, with serving Krishna. So we'll go ahead and stop there. Anna Krishna Kuni has some comment?
Just a quick comment. I really liked your Bhagavad Gita 260-263 elaboration about how Dhyayata Vishayam Pumso can also refer to meditation on Krishna, contemplating Krishna, and then we develop attachment and that. So I was going through the second verse in my mind, Kodad Bhavati Samoha Smithvima. What is that buddhinasho? What does it mean that our intelligence gets lost? Our material intelligence gets lost, but also our spiritual knowledge even gets lost. We just become enchanted by Krishna as a person in Vrijvasi, in Vrindavan, and forget all about him being God. I just wanted to share that.
That's a beautiful comment. Thank you very much. Anapani Radha, would you like to say anything? Anapani Radha has an official position with Gopalji Publications. She's our official resident mad artist. Here she is.
I really explained this topic and the title of the topic, how these two words connected. And also I really inspired by your explanation of this verse of Rupa Goswami. And also especially this Cheta Prangana Sangini, that when the holy name, when the yard associated with the holy name, it means that its heart is conquered, senses are conquered. This is how you actually can become connoisseur. It's interesting. And just a short question: where is that word connoisseur from? I'm just interested because
I'll have to look that up. I'm not sure where the word connoisseur comes from. Lynn makes some comment. Thank you so much. She says, "I look forward to participating in the drama of the Hare Krishnas." Drama is such a wonderful thing when you watch a good drama. We've been watching one of the earliest movies made in India, in Bengal in the 1950s. It's called Nimai of Nadia. And the singing and the acting in it is so beautiful, and the humor, it's just so charming to the heart when there's really good theater, when it's done in a very devotional way. It's about the pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And another wonderful artist friend, Ramana Sukha Prabhu, is commenting that Krishna Bhakti is the ascetic mode of worship of the supremely beautiful Radha and Krishna. Krishna Bhakti is all about art and serving the supreme artist. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Ramana Sukha Prabhu. So we're going to stop there. I have to think about this subject more. There's a lot more to be said about it, but I'm not sure if I want to continue or if I want to go back to the Bhagavatam verses right now or not. If I want to continue with the next verse, but there's a whole lot more to be said about this, the culmination of art and bhakti. Anyway, thank you all very much for attending us today. We'll be here, we won't be here tomorrow. Tomorrow's Wednesday. We'll be back on Thursday and then Saturday. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.